The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show here on Off the Ball on OurGame. I've done it 2 weeks in a row, haven't I? I'm just that busy. I'm just that kept going. Michael Verney, I'm under awful pressure here today. It's All-Ireland semi-final week, and wouldn't you know it, I'm under pressure.
It's All-Ireland semi-final week and Tip aren't in it, and that would be the only reference of the Premier this week, I can tell you that. It's some weekend to look forward to. Two absolutely cracking semi-finals. So much to discuss. So many different matchups, so many different potential things, loads of different subplots going into it. I almost feel like I should have the helmet on here, ready to go. But it's going to be 2 brilliant days, and I kind of got that feeling coming into this year's championship that it was going to be something special, and I think we could have 2 really special semi-finals this weekend again. It's been brilliant so far. The fair has been unreal. Every weekend there's been, unbelievable drama nearly every Saturday, every Sunday, and I think it's going to be the exact same again this weekend.
Yeah, I have to say, my match programme from the last day here, I am buzzing for this. Which game are you looking forward to more? I have to say, the clash of Kilkenny against Cork, because we haven't seen them play in the championship for a couple of years, that's the one I'm really jonesing for that one, I have to say.
Probably the same, because there's that fear with Cork. If you're from Kilkenny, there's that fear of that they could produce anything, but there's also that fear from a Cork point of view that they might not deliver in Croke Park, much like they didn't deliver, I would say, after the first 20 or 25 minutes 2 years ago when they played Kilkenny. I think the real interesting thing about that game is you've a fair idea what you're going to get from Kilkenny, as you normally do, maybe aside from last year's All-Ireland semi-final. You're still not 100% sure whether Cork have arrived. And this is their chance to either it's building towards next year or the year after, or they will announce their arrival by 5:10 on Sunday evening. I think that's the really, really interesting. And that's to say that's the one you're looking forward to more than the game on Saturday, which is repeat of last year's Munster and All-Ireland semi-final. You'd probably say, and we go into it in more detail, Waterford are better than they were last year, and interesting to see whether people think whether Limerick are not so sure.
Yeah. So, look, we're brought to you by Torpy and the Bamboo Stick. If you want to win one, get a comment in on the YouTube video, whether you're watching on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. At some stage between now and the throw-in for the first match, which is Saturday at 5 o'clock, try and get the comment in. The best comment we will be picking out, or it might not be the best comment, might be the most creative one, might be the funniest one. We'll kind of play it by ear as we go along. You just never know who's going to produce that big performance on the day. It might be someone you expect, but they might get marked out of it and someone else steps up.
I will tell you this: if somebody makes a comment that manages to merge GA and the Simpsons or GA and the wrestling, they definitely will go up, in my estimation anyway, and be high on my radar, I can tell you that. So Dublin's Fair City, you're on notice.
Or Hulk Hogan or something like that. You'd be all over that, wouldn't you?
I would. I'd love something like that now, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been using that Bamboo Stick lately, and as you saw in the video where myself and Nisha Waldron tried the 100-yard Jason Ford free from earlier in the league, I got 3 out of 5, and that tells you that the old sweet spot in the middle of the boss is fairly big, and she's driving it long. So definitely worth winning that prize.
It would normally be a 0 out of 5. So in fairness, that's a massive, massive improvement.
Yeah, well, look, so much so that the manager of the second team in Kula said to me, after seeing that video, we're looking at you for the long-range freeze. So, so that'll tell you it's a fair old hurley. It's worth having a look at. A couple of the comments in here already. You see the likes of Jack Burke here. Subscribe, Shane Power, subscribe. These are lads that obviously you've subscribed to the YouTube channel as well. Those are the people we'll be looking at to pick the winning prize from. I'm sure you can understand from that point of view. We'll get a couple of the comments. Porrick91, with all the Munster counties performing to a decent standard this year, what do you think a round-robin table would have looked like this year? So that's where I had the idea that if you had the provincial round-robins like you had the last couple of years up until the pandemic, that once they were finished and a final was played, that you merged the tables together, and then you'd have, a mix of Kilkenny, Tip, Galway, Cork, and so on and so forth. And all the Leinster teams would then have to play the Munster and so on until you had a final table where every single county in the top tier played each other. Hard to know, isn't it? I think God, you'd love to see, like, I mean, obviously there's a few counties gone now at this stage, but it's always a shame when the season goes by and you don't see Galway against, you know, Clare or Tipperary against Kilkenny or so on. But I think Limerick would be up there near the top. Waterford, you know, I mean, you did, to be fair, push for Waterford being very high up in the hurling rankings, as we've done a couple of times this year. We might do them again shortly. But who would you have at top? I'd say Limerick would probably still be up there.
Probably, even though consistently they haven't been, you know, as good maybe as previous years. Definitely haven't been as good as last year, as consistent as last year. You probably would still have them on the balance of play. You're thinking they could probably lose a game in that Munster round robin, but they're probably going to still finish overall top. But it would have been like you're looking at 2022. You're thinking Clare are, you know, so much better than they were 2 years ago. Limerick are obviously still going to be there. Waterford should only get better. Should definitely only get better. Cork are only going to get better. Could be in an All-Ireland final by 5:30 on Sunday evening. And then you're looking at, I'm forgetting one county. Oh, I've forgotten Tipperary. Tipperary, who are potentially under Deise still as good as anybody. So, you know, I can't wait. If things go back to normal as they should next year, that Munster round robin is going to be class again. And obviously, with 2022, you're going to have Galway trying to prove a point in Leinster as well. You've Kilkenny going for 3 in a row, which they haven't, you know, been going for in a while. So, yeah, just rock on 2022.
Yeah, we still have plenty to go this season, though. A few more comments. Brian White, who do you see picking up TJ Reid for Cork this week? We are going to bring up a tactics board at some stage, so we'll come to that. Lionel Strongjaw, who do you think is in Hurler of the Year territory? Again, that's a topic we'll be touching on later in the show, and get your comments in. Let us know who you think is up there. Kev Kyo, Cork continue Munster complete dominance over Leinster teams this year. Start is crucial in the Waterford game. Fancy Waterford to be ahead at half-time and finish stronger this week. Also wonders if I get the jersey correct today. I did mix up the Monaghan and Waterford jersey. I was in a rush. I'm down in Cork for the week here, actually, and maybe that'll lead to me tipping the Rebels. Who knows? A couple of more comments in also. Brendan Kelly, Jamie Barron is like Bart Simpson, flying around every inch of the place on his skateboard.
I like it, Brendan. I like it.
Oh, I know you do. Paul Newtape, strangely, Waterford haven't won the All-Ireland in 62 years, and the Limerick team's first 15 are overall 62 inches taller than Waterford's first 15, and 62 kilos heavier also. Good omens for Waterford. If that is true, that is a nuts level of insight and analysis. Jack Nulty, Cork haven't beaten Kilkenny in a while, and Kilkenny have competed with Munster teams. Interesting thing to note is Cork haven't won a championship game at Croke Park since the All-Ireland semi-final of 2013. So they're looking to end a few famines here. A famine since 2005, since their last All-Ireland, and then of course even a Croke Park hoodoo. Sort of thing that was levelled against the Galway footballers up until a couple of years ago. Do you remember that? They hadn't won a game there between maybe 2019 and their All-Ireland final win of 2001 in the football. So it does become a bit of a thing after a while. We will come to that in a while, but Limerick against...
It's the nature of the defeat, Shane, isn't it? It's the nature of the defeats in Croke Park. You know, a flop against Tip in 14. You know, just Limerick just overpowered them at the finish in 18 and end up losing extra time. A flop against Kilkenny in 19 after the first 20 or 25 minutes. That's probably the most worrying aspect. If you're getting beaten by a point or two and you're competing till the last minute, you know, I don't think that sort of thing matters. But you'd have to say for this Cork team, you would think that Croke Park would suit them with the amount of space available to them because they're just so pacey. But I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, we're going to start off with Limerick against Waterford. Limerick looking to get back on track, or stay on track, I should say, to retain in this All-Ireland. Last year, they beat Waterford a couple of times in both the Munster final and All-Ireland final. Now, it was very close at the three-quarter stage of the Munster final down in Semple Stadium. Waterford pushed Limerick very close. I don't think anyone gave them a massive chance going into that game, because even the win over Cork in the semi-final was against the expectations of the general public. Now, here on OurGame, we did predict Waterford would win that game, but I think they only lost by a couple of scores in that game. Then the All-Ireland final was totally different. It was 30 points to 19. Now, a few things went against Waterford, of course, losing Tadhg de Burca, who was, you know, not far off Hurler of the Year territory at the time early on in the game. You know, Iarla Daly did well in his place, but that's a massive blow. But I'm even looking at this Waterford team. There's so much to talk about here, but I'm even looking at the Waterford team and seeing how Liam Cahill has changed things around. Like, he's not a guy who sees, you know, sort of shortcomings in the team and says, you know what, I'll persevere with that and hopefully it'll get better the next day. No, he turns it upside down a little bit like Brian Cody. But he's changed the team a nice bit from last year. Now, some of these guys have stepped away, some are injured. But he's changed the goalkeeper. Now, this is assuming, we're going to assume that Shane McNulty holds his place and Conor Gleeson, who was suspended for the last day, because McNulty did quite well, that he'll keep his place. But based on last year's All-Ireland final, we're looking at probably a new goalkeeper, a new number 6, a new number 7. You're looking at a new number 9, Peter Hogan. Kieran Bennett will go back into the backs. Will Neil Montgomery get a start? And then after that, the forward line is pretty much how it was last year. But you're looking at 4 or 5 changes there. Whereas Limerick, the only change that we're expecting to see here now, I think it's fair to say we both expect to see Dan Morrissey start this time and Aaron Gallan start this time. That means that the only change between the All-Ireland final last year when they met Waterford and now will be that we expect Peter Casey to start instead of Graham Mulcahy. And other than that, it would be pretty much the exact same. So from that point of view, you'd have to say that Liam Cahill can very much study what's coming from Limerick, and there's far more of an opportunity. Like, they've been very road tested against the exact team pretty much that they're going to come up against. Is there any advantage there?
Yeah, I suppose you've said it before. The footage is there for everybody to analyse Limerick. There hasn't been that much change in Limerick since 2018. It's generally been the same personnel, and the style of play has generally stayed the same. If anything, maybe they're playing the ball even through the hand a bit more, and they're probably going longer maybe on puckouts than maybe they had in previous years. But that's all there for Liam Cahill to analyse. And that's why I suppose he's had maybe the luxury, you could say, of being able to make changes, being able to bring in Shane Bennett. That's something that Limerick haven't maybe dealt with before, how they're going to get around him at centre-back. Maybe Sean O'Brien offers something different in the goals, maybe puckouts-wise. That's something that Limerick haven't come up against before. So, he has that kind of luxury of having introduced new faces. So Limerick will be seeing something different when they look up on Saturday evening. And I think that can only be a plus for Cahill. Cahill has probably seen their shortcomings against Limerick, has tried to rectify them. And even, not just against Limerick, they had shortcomings earlier on this year, and he's tried to rectify them as well. So the advantage, you would say, is probably in his court at that stage. But it's all about potential. You're thinking there's potential for improvement, whereas you have a fair idea what you're going to get from Limerick. Whereas I suppose from Cahill's point of view and Mikey Bevan's point of view, you're trying to see where can they make up the inches that they're going to need to make up. And there's just some really interesting conundrums, I would say, for Cahill on Saturday evening. But his willingness to change, as you've said, he ripped up the script with the Tip Miners after they were beaten, came back and won All-Ireland. He ripped up the script somewhat with the 21s after they were beaten, came back and won All-Ireland. Didn't maybe have to do so as much so with the 20s the year after. He's ripped up the script this year. He changed the keeper. He changed the keeper after the Laois game, I think it was. He changed the keeper. Or was it? Did Sean O'Brien come in for the Laois game, or did he come in for the game after?
Came in for the Galway game.
Came in for the Galway game.
Oh, so maybe you're right. No, someone will correct us there.
But he has absolutely no issue with making changes on the fly. Who would have predicted that Shane Bennett was going to start centre back in an All-Ireland semi-final? You couldn't really have. Maybe wing-back at a push, but definitely not centre-back. And after seeing him the day against Laois, when he was a bit kind of jittery and maybe trying to be a bit too smart at wing-back, you couldn't envisage him going in centre-back. So he has no problem making changes there. I suppose the thing is, he's already seen their shortcomings against Limerick. And I'm just going to go through a couple of kind of questions that I would have here. Jamie Byrne has not been a factor against Limerick. He wasn't a factor against Limerick in their 2 games last year. He wasn't a factor in their Munster game in 19, and he wasn't a factor in the league final. It's generally been Will O'Donoghue who has been able to overpower him. And when Barron gets the ball and weaves in now a space, there's generally just been more Limerick bodies in that area, and he can't have an influence in the game. And I'd say a couple of times he's been nearly Coffer over carrying because he's trying to get away from a space that just isn't there. So really interesting to see, does he put him at centre forward maybe for a stage at the weekend? Does he try to do something a little different with him? Does he do maybe like a Cian Lynch, maybe what Kylie has done with Cian Lynch? Throw something different at him. They're going to try and just nail it, because Limerick are going to look at him and they're going to say, if we hold him down, and probably if we hold Gleeson down, we will win this game. So knowing that it hasn't worked for Barron against Limerick in the last couple of meetings, will he try something different? And I'd be really interested to see whether he goes to 11, because for them to win the game, he's going to have to be, as good as he was in the opening 15 or 20 minutes against Tip last weekend.
It's a bold one. I don't see that happening, because what I do see is that Waterford, like we've just been talking, that their team has changed a nice bit from the All-Ireland last year, and the supporting cast in that middle sector of the field. So if you can't break even in terms of winning 50-50 ball, winning breaking ball, puck out breaks, the whole lot, you're just not going to win. Well, generally you're not going to win anyway, but certainly not against Limerick, because if they start winning all those balls, they're going to destroy it, like they did Tip in the second half. But in the first half, when Limerick couldn't get all those breaks, when they were getting turned over, I felt a couple of their hurlers that have been much celebrated looked like very ordinary hurlers. And I mean, even the stick work, shots dropped short, lads getting blocked down, lads planting the feet. You know, there's an element that when you're under pressure, you know, we all sort of revert to type and sort of, look, I'm just getting rid of this ball. And you get this sense that, you know, the composure that you see so often with Limerick players, they always feel like that they're in a little bit of space, and you wonder how to do this in tight spots. But all of a sudden, when you're under pressure, you know, you've been out in the field and you get possession, and you almost feel like I'm about to get tackled from all directions. So you're a little bit spooked, and you start driving the ball because you've been tackled once or twice unexpectedly. But coming back to the Waterford thing, if you look at the middle zone of the field last year, their half back line had a very tough time of it. Caleb Lyons had a tough time of it. Kevin Moran had a very tough time of it, obviously trying to keep up when you're that bit older. It's so tough, especially if you're not winning ball. Jake Dillon had a tough time at midfield. And I think this time, you know, Kieran Bennett was midfield. Neil Montgomery was playing centre forward, I suppose, coming out, and so was Jack Prendergast from the full forward line. But this time, Peter Hogan is in a serious rich vein of form. He was winning an awful lot of turnover ball against Galway. Thought he was really good. Half back line is all pace. Now, you can look at Caleb Lyons, you can look at Shane Bennett and Kieran Bennett and think there are ways that they can be caught out. So what did they do with Cian Lynch, which we'll come to in a second? Kieran Bennett, if he's under high ball against either Tom Morrissey or Gerard Hegarty, or maybe even Cian Lynch, who's unbelievable in the air because he's so strong, you suspect that there could be a little bit of bother there. But I think there's serious pace in that half-back line. They should not be done for pace whatsoever or energy. Like, think of Kieran Bennett going under a 74th minute puck out at the other end of the field against Tipperary and helping win that ball back. So midfield then, Hogan is flying, Jamie Barron. I think Jamie Barron needs to just go out there and just try and win as much ball as he can, as he just have a work rate to the absolute nth degree and let the hurling take care of itself. Then you're obviously going to have Patrick Kern coming out from corner forward out towards the middle of the field, looking to knit play as he's done in the last few games. And then can Jack Fagan, Jack Prendergast, Stephen Bennett, Peter Hogan and so on. Like, there is a little bit of change there. So I don't feel like it's going to be the same old issue for Waterford and Jamie Barron. And if they can break even out there, that's when he starts to take over a little bit. Isn't that what happened with Clare last year? Cathal Malone, they flooded the middle to some degree. Cathal Malone did a good job of tying up Cian Lynch for a lot of the game. Clare lost by a nice bit, but they did okay in that sector. Jerry Millerick, he did pretty well on Cian Lynch earlier in the year. And, he's a very hard guy to tie down. If you tie him down, you might, like, I see plenty of scope for big improvement for Waterford.
The interesting thing is it's such a fine balance between playing your own game, but also respecting, your opponents and trying to tie down the men that will really do the damage. So tying down Cian Lynch is obviously huge, but it's a tricky one. Barron needs to play his game, but he needs to play his game and express himself. But he also needs to kind of, he also needs to try and, really win that sector with Peter Hogan and not let Will O'Donoghue get those big turnovers. So it's going to be really interesting there. You mentioned Cian Lynch. The conundrum for Cathal about who picks up Lynch is really interesting, because I don't see, an outstanding candidate standing forward. Like, Cian Lynch is probably going to be stationed at centre forward. Do I see Shane Bennett picking him up as a man marker? I don't. I couldn't see it, really, to be honest with you, because he wants to sit back. He wants to attack as well, and he wants to kind of knit that play together. Do I see Caleb Lyons coming into the centre potentially to pick him up, and if he roams? I'm not so sure as well. I think a possible player that could pick him up might be Shane McNulty, who could potentially go out the pitch to pick him up, particularly if Limerick play two men inside, which they invariably will. So I wouldn't be that surprised if McNulty maybe drifted out and followed Lynch around, maybe like Mellerick did. But it's a real interesting conundrum for Cathal, because it has been seen. The last time Cian Lynch was really held out of a game was when Conor Brown held him in the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final, and that's the last time Limerick were beaten in championship. So that their card is marked there. if they need to stop one man, it's probably Lynch.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to bring up the tactics board again here and we can talk through it a little bit. So I just have the players all named out in their starting positions based on their numbers. You know that number 2 and 5, for example, they're always on the right-hand side. I don't necessarily see all of these matchups playing out the way they are here. So if I just move things around a little bit, I can see it basically going to be 2v2 on the inside line with a floating marker. So I can see Conor Prunty being on Aaron Gallan, and you can obviously give me your input here as well. You see Shane McNulty drifting out a little bit. So maybe you're going to end up with Ian Kenny against Seamus Flanagan, which to me straight away it's a little bit worrisome in terms of like a physical matchup. Now, Cian Lynch will drift out a nice bit and try and go everywhere he can. I think Shane McNulty will be kind of drifting after Peter Casey. This is obviously a little bit packed. I'll try and just shove these guys down here a little bit to open up a bit of space. But I think Shane McNulty will be looking to pick up Peter Casey. Then you are left with a couple of matchups that look a little bit troublesome for Waterford here. Do you see Hegarty being marked by Kieran Bennett or Calum Lyons?
Just crucially on that, Shane, if you look back at last year's Munster final, Hegarty was quiet enough in that game for about 50 minutes. And I think the main reason is because Jack Fagan was playing wing forward on Hegarty's side and dropped back and spoiled Hegarty to some extent. If you're looking at the game, would you say Jack Fagan had a massive influence in the game? Probably not.
Well, last year's 2 games, I think Jack Fagan was quiet in both games. Okay,
just the only thing I will say is he was quiet in the first 50 minutes of the Munster final, and when he was on Hegarty's wing, Hegarty and Hayes actually were both quiet. Fagan started the other wing in the All-Ireland final, and Hegarty absolutely went to town. So, and fair enough, like Jack was he was quiet in that All-Ireland final anyway. And struggled to get into things. But I think they will have him on Hegarty's side, and if all he does is forage for an hour and has very little influence on the scoreboard, but just basically denies Hegarty getting into the game, potentially denies Hayes getting into the game, excuse me, I think that would be a massive day's work for him done.
Yeah, okay. I'll just go back to the team here again. And obviously the page is a little bit busy, so just doing our best with it.
Well, it's funny, it's busy because it's going to, wait to see how busy it gets out around that middle third because there's going to be bodies everywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Grode Hegarty is going to look to go up and back, and I think Waterford have to follow him. There's no doubt about that. And I think Shane Bennett will sit back. So like you're saying, that who goes on Cian Lynch? Is it
just Shane, will you switch Fagan? Will you switch Fagan onto Hegarty's side? Will you put Fagan wing forward on Hegarty's side? I cannot see them allowing that. He was, as I said, he was quietly effective in the Munster final. I'd be amazed if he's not going up and down that wing.
But then what happens with Kyle Hayes? Because he's going to make those long bursts and runs. And Michael Breen did a very good job of shutting him down for the basically all bar one instance of the Munster hurling final. And, is Stephen Bennett on that side? Bennett has serious pace, so maybe he will. I mean, Austin Gleeson is going to come out. I think Patrick Curran is definitely going to go out.
Yeah,
I think we're going to see Deise Hutchinson up against Sean Finn. That seems likely enough.
Can I just ask you on that one? Deise Hutchinson has struggled like he did. He struggled in the two games against Finn last year's Munster final and All-Ireland final. Is there anything different that they can do with him to just avoid him being potentially totally nullified by Sean Finn? Like if Finn has his, like I remember Noel Connors always had Patrick Horgan's measure when they played for about 3 or 4 years there, and Horgan was Cork's best forward, and all of a sudden he eventually got the upper hand on him maybe towards the latter stages of Connors' career, but they play games there where Horgan was not in games because Connors had his measure. I wonder, is there anything different that Waterford could do with Deise Hutchinson to not even maybe take Finn out of the game, because it's how demoralising is it when your best forward is blocked down or hooked by their best defender, and all of a sudden a move is made by the cornerback, wing back, and then it ends up in a score. It's very demoralising. I wonder, would Deise maybe drift a bit more and mix his time between inside as a 2-man inside and maybe drifting out, just to maybe take Sean Finn out of its comfort zone a bit. I just think it's an interesting thing for Cattle as well. You want to stamp your own players on the game, but you also don't want to make the same mistakes you've made before.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting one. Like, if you brought him out wing forward, I mean, I don't necessarily think you'd want him under 20 puckouts or anything like that. He did catch a great ball. Was it the last day or against Waterford or Galway? So he obviously has that in his locker too. But one thing I'd like to see is ball go into him, not 100-mile-an-hour ball straight down his throat or bouncing in front of him where he has to somehow control and spin in one go. and all Finn has to do is just sort of nudge him a little bit, and there's no way to win the ball. He needs that, like, let's say he's standing just to the left of the D or that area. If the ball is coming across field, he needs it just coming across him so he's turning and ready to strike already. Every inside forward wants that. Like, that's the sort of ball that Aaron Gallagher gets plenty of times in a game, or that Seamus Flanagan or whatever. And that is the difference with Limerick. They make it so easy for their inside forwards at times by just hitting beautiful ball, like a ball that bounces once just in front of them, and sort of it's nearly tickling itself up the hurley without you even trying to do anything. And that's the difference. If you got that ball to Deise Hutchinson, and like, he's another year of experience under his belt. Last year he came in after never hurling inter-county before at the top level, and you're expecting him to go into, in a COVID season when he probably hasn't had all the games he'd like, and he was probably in and out of the team for a little bit. It's very hard to expect him to go in against Sean Finn, the best inside defender in the game, and go to town. But imagine his confidence now. He's after going well in a few games this year. He's after getting a nice few scores the last day against Tipperary, whipped one to the net, the whole lot. I'd say his confidence is up there a little bit more. He doesn't have to worry about his plays. He just knows to be patient over the course of the game. But one thing I would definitely love to see him do if I was Liam Cahill, and Liam Cahill's underage teams with Tipperary were goal machines. Like, I think they scored like 45 goals in the space of 6 seasons or something like that. It was nuts. Pin your ears back and go straight at your man. Because who wants to keep with Deise Hutchinson? A guy who was a professional footballer obviously has a serious set of wheels on it. Now, I interviewed him before, and he talked about how at soccer level he wasn't, particularly fast or anything like that, which of course makes sense because they're, another level again. But like, he has speed. Get the ball to him in space. Tell him turn, go at your man. Because the Limerick defenders are just the same as anyone else. They do not want to be run at. Like, if you go through that forward line, and someone has made a comment there, what are Waterford going to do, or Limerick going to do against the Waterford running game? Yeah, that's Dennis Hayes in there with a comment. But Stephen Bennett has unbelievable pace. Remember some of those like 80-yard solos he did last year against Kilkenny? Imagine he's going at you with Patrick Kern on his shoulder, and then Peter Hogan coming, and then recycle the ball and Jamie Barnes coming, and Fagan and Prendergast. I mean, like, look at Prendergast, the way he set up the goal chances against Tipperary. These lads have so much pace. It can't, if they win enough ball and they keep that running game going as they have against Galway and Tipperary, like, it surely has to cause more bother last year in that All-Ireland when they lost by 30 points to 19. Putting up 19 in today's game is just a fairly poor return, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it won't be enough. I wonder, is there, and I think there is, to be honest with you. This is obviously going to be summer hurling, a different sod than we played on last year, albeit, in Croke Park, and they think it was Thurles for the Munster final. But this is proper summer sod. It should suit the likes of Deise Hutchinson, should suit the likes of Jack Prendergast. There will be nothing slowing them down at all, and conditions shouldn't be slowing them down either. So I think that will definitely play to their strengths. Interestingly said about Deise and his speed. I remember when I was teaching in Banner College, I'd always take most of the best hurlers, the fastest hurlers, to athletics meets, and they do okay, but when you're coming up against proper sprinters, they're not going to blitz lads like they would in the hurling field. Then they come back to the hurling pitch and they're still all a level above, and his speed is definitely a level above most GA players. But it's going to be interesting to see, can he cause Sean Finn trouble? The big thing is, and you've said it there, is that when he gets that ball coming into him, generally, when they play other teams, there's more space around. There's space to maneuver. When you play against Limerick, they cut off the opportunities for these one-on-ones. You just don't see it that much. All of a sudden, there's bodies kind of diverging into the middle, and it's not Deise Hutchinson versus Sean Finn. It's Deise Hutchinson versus Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey, Richie English, Declan Hannon, or whoever it is. But there was definitely enough hope for Waterford and others in probably the 2 goals that Tip got. Declan Hannon did look leggy when he was turned, and I know that's the cliche thing, put a defender on the back foot, but that's what Waterford need to do, and that their running game will have to be down to an absolute T. Funnily enough, they didn't hit a goal against Limerick last year. They're gonna have to hit minimum of 2 goals to beat Limerick at the weekend. That's just the way it is, and I think they've been building towards that, and I think all teams have been building towards knowing that they need goals. I think Kilkenny's game has changed even a bit, with even more of an emphasis on goals. Cork definitely has. What would you say the sole change in Cork this year is? They just want green flags. I think Waterford is the same. And that's that. If things go to plan for them in that regard, and they're able to raise a couple of green flags, they have a huge chance. But Limerick players will converge and try and deny as much space as possible for the likes of Deise Hutchison, the likes of Ozzie Gleeson, who is bringing, savage form into this game as well. I think the interesting thing is, well, Shane, I have to say, I am of the opinion that Limerick haven't hurled particularly well this year. They haven't. No, I don't care. And I think the quarter, and it was only a quarter against Tip. It wasn't a half against Tip. It was about 20 minutes against Tip, and the game was over. You take that out, you take probably the first half against Cork in the league, and that's probably 35 minutes and 20 minutes where Limerick were absolutely brilliant. Outside of that, I think those little periods of play have probably masked Limerick not being at their best. They're definitely not. I would not say they're at 2020 form. Definitely not. So I think there's a lot of hope for Waterford, and there's hope for others there. Limerick are obviously caught cold in the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final. Everyone, it just seems to be expecting, the vast majority are expecting Limerick to win. And, think that this Limerick team, it's their divine right to go on and win back-to-back. But there's definitely question marks there, and things that they need to answer as well.
Yeah. In the past couple of years when you're talking about the Dublin footballers, it feels like a lot of the time, because they were so dominant, you were trying to build up your previews and come up with ways that, well, maybe they could be possibly turned over this way and turned over that way. But you look at Waterford and you can see ways that definitely Limerick can get scores here. So they're definitely the favourites. But I agree with you. They're hurling in fits and starts. And against Cork, they got a couple of goals right before half-time. Really well-worked moves. Kyle Hayes on the burst for that puck out. Lovely little pass where Aaron Gallant smacked the ball into the ground and, Kyle Hayes stayed going. Then obviously against Tipperary, like you said, those 15 minutes. But it is in fits and starts the whole time. They played those 2 championship games, and like you've said, it probably, it isn't even a full good game of hurling between the two of them. But when they have hit that level, all of a sudden they've gone kind of supersonic. And they can do that against Waterford again. I would be fearful for Waterford that if you have a team that, you could argue that there's 11 attackers on the field, everyone from 5 to 15 there, their first instinct is to score. But if you look at Limerick, there are players Richie English was in the team and he's probably going to be out of the team, so they've kind of changed around at full back. The odd time Barry Nash has looked a little bit comfortable at cornerback, but other times he's looked excellent there. The midfield and their middle eight looked a bit ropey against Tipperary under massive pressure. Can Waterford put that pressure on them? Then Aaron Gallant not starting. He'll obviously start this time out unless there's something crazy. But the other thing is the discipline. Will the discipline catch up with Limerick in this game? Because there's been a few times, we looked at the head-high tackles, Hegarty against Minnerick. Obviously, Aaron Gallant should have seen red against Tipperary. So should Seamus Flanagan, Dunton, Pádraig Maher. So could that catch them out here?
Yeah, potentially. And obviously, if you're looking back at the league game, which I don't think is insignificant. Fair enough, Waterford beat, a 14-man Limerick when Seamus Flanagan was sent off for striking Conor Gleeson before half-time. I do think there was a relevance and an importance in that they were able to kick on and beat Limerick for the first time in a long time. But you're talking about the freeze and Waterford trying to exploit maybe Limerick's tackling. In last year's Munster final, they came out after half-time when the game looked potentially like it was slipping away from them, and they just ran. Every chance they got, they took Limerick on, and Stephen Bennett's freeze probably brought them back into the game. I do think that's something that they'll go after again on Saturday evening. It has to be. And when they were able to put Limerick on the back foot, they did look a bit vulnerable. Probably forced a couple of goal chances that day. Didn't really get the chance to do that in the All-Ireland final. Probably because that was, that's probably been Limerick's one of their most complete performances in the last couple of years. But if Waterford are able to put their stamp on the game, and if they can get a start like they have in the last couple of games, it's going to be really interesting. But the way Waterford have finished their last 2 games is slightly worrying. Take Neil Montgomery's cameo out of it and Mikey Kiley's cameo out of it. Tip gave them the puck out at different stages in the game, and Waterford looked so comfortable carrying the ball up the field. With their running game, it suited them down to the ground. All of a sudden, there was a stage there in the second half where I'd say Sean O'Brien had to go long 12 to 15 times nearly in a row. And I don't know if they win a puck out. If Limerick make them do that, which I'm sure they will at important stages of the game, Waterford are going to, I don't know whether they're going to have to flood everyone to a wing and try and get the ball to the ground and get possession, or what they're going to do, but they cannot allow, ball just to be bombarded down on top of that Limerick half back line, because they will definitely come off second best. So Liam Cattell has talked about it before, that they haven't been particularly good when they have had to limit the damage. And that was the case during the league. You know, when teams were getting on top of them, they were, you know, it was game-winning bursts. Limerick are going to get on top of them at some stage, and they can't allow what happened happen them on Saturday when Limerick get that purple patch. So they're just going to have to try and stick to the way they want to play, and not allow Limerick to sucker them into playing the game exactly as they wanted to play it, because they're going to want them to go along. That is what they are going to want. That's the way they're going to want it. And Waterford just need to resist that. As you say, it's reverting to type. It's staying doing the thing that looks really, not low percentage, but it just looks really difficult to do in the face of all the pressure. And they're just going to have to stick to that for 75, 76 minutes.
Yeah, and they're going to have to use those water breaks, those tactical breaks very, very well. And, you know, you talked about maybe overloading like one side for puck out. If you've lost one or two puck outs, you can't allow that to continue. So maybe you go long on top of Jack Fagan, and you have 5 lads going into that zone. Limerick will probably see it coming, but the very thing you can't afford is that Limerick keep winning those. You have to have a way, even if it's a short puck out to Conor Prunty or Shane McNulty, that everyone knows it's going to McNulty, and then you're going to the far away. You know, something like that. I mean, Sean Flynn, the Burgess hurling manager and former Tipperary analyst, he was talking about how Waterford scored 215 from turnovers against Tipperary the last day, but how it's been nothing like that against Limerick in their last 2 games that they played last year, the Munster and All-Ireland final. They've gotten nothing like it. That Waterford and Limerick both live off turning teams over and breaking at absolute speed. And I'm even looking at the team that I'm just going to try and bring it up on screen here again. And I'm even looking at how crowded that this middle area could be. Like, if you look at those players, and I mean, it may not pan out perfectly like that, but I think we've seen that Waterford want to have Jamie Barron there. They want to have Peter Hogan there. They want them all bringing the ball, carry the ball, give it to Jack Prendergast. Maybe Stephen Bennett will come on the loop. Fagan will come on the loop. Patrick Curran, you know, all these guys. Then Deise Hutchinson is the guy keeping Limerick honest inside. Where will Ozzy end up? He was man-marked by Brendan Maher the last day. Who will pick him up? Will it be Dan Morrissey? I don't think Dan Morrissey is going to follow him out. Now, Dan Morrissey is obviously a half-back, but I think they'll want to keep him out, keep him inside in the square. But just look at how packed that's going to be, because at the other end, it's probably going to be Gallan and Flanagan. And after that, everyone piling out. Like, Gerard Hegarty's going to be looking for ball in his own half. So is Tom Morrissey. This is going to be the greatest traffic jam of all time in a hurling match. But what I will say, and again, you know, we talked it up and down and left and right about Waterford. They have scored massively in the last 2 games. 428 is the most the Tipperary have ever conceded in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship. That is an outrageous scoreline. But 131 against Galway in the game before that. And these are 2 teams that before the start of the season, we said both of these are All-Ireland challengers. Didn't we rank Galway at number 2? It was like, well, Limerick are number 1 and clearly Galway are number 2, but they knocked them out. And we were like, well, Tipperary are obviously number 2 now. And they go and knock them out. So at what stage do we stop saying, well, look, Waterford, they're about to get caught, and just say, Waterford are a common team. And not only are they like right there at number 2, this is a better team than last year. And the more we're talking about how Limerick maybe aren't at the same level as last year. Are we kind of moving in that direction here?
Potentially. And you mentioned Dan Morrissey. I do think Dan Morrissey hasn't started a game since probably the 2nd or 3rd league game, I'd say. So I do think Waterford will have a good go at him. And I think if they're playing 2 inside, which they invariably will, that he will be one of them. And they'll be trying to move him around as much as possible. Whether that's Ozzy that's in on him or not, I'm not so sure. It could be Stephen Bennett at different stages. But I definitely think they will look at him. You had McNulty or Prunty earmarked for Gallan. I'm not so sure. Prunty could end up on Flanagan. Gallan obviously came on the last day and was very, very good. But, you know, before that, he's been below par this year. So maybe they'll think that they'll get away with Ian Kenny or Shane McNulty picking up him. Something we still haven't settled on. Like, what do you think they'll do with Cian Lynch? Because that is a big conundrum for them, and who will track him?
And I'm looking at it here, and I'm trying to see who's the most obvious guy first.
There's not. That's the thing. There's not an obvious option.
And which makes me think that when there's no obvious option there, the guy who's probably closest to being, you know, named on the team marked up against him, like Lynch is going to line out as a roving centre forward. It's probably going to be Shane Bennett. And you might, like, we can see the downside. Shane Bennett has obviously played defender for Ballysaggart and has done it for a few games here for Waterford. But we certainly haven't seen him in an All-Ireland semi-final against arguably the best hurler in the game. I mean, he's certainly in the top 3 at the going rate. I'd probably see them matching up and just saying, well, look, I mean, here's our best 15, here's your best 15. We'll crowd the middle and see who comes up out of the pit. I kind of think that's the way it's going to be.
Maybe they won't overcomplicate it, and that's what they will do. I think Iarla Daly's availability is big for them because he is kind of that sort of player that can nullify others and just get a job done and, do that, do a job that was for the greater good of the team and does not essentially mean that he's going to shine. So I think his availability, particularly maybe in the last 20 or 25 minutes, is going to be huge. But I will go as far as saying Jack Fagan has been taken off in most games around the hour mark, I'd say. If he's taken off on the hour mark or 65 minutes at the weekend and he's done a 7 or 8 out of 10, Waterford have a massive chance. Same with Jack Prendergast, has been taken off nearly every game on the hour mark. If he has a massive influence again and has emptied the tank and has put Limerick on the back foot, I would go as far as saying that the 2 Jacks will essentially decide how Limerick go at the weekend. I have no problem in saying that because that's the way it is now. It's how your foragers go. Are they able to have an impact on the scoreboard, their own end, but more importantly, probably the other end? I expect to see Jack Fagan under Limerick puckouts. I expect to see him under Waterford puckouts. And how those 2 in particular play, I think, will tell a massive tale.
Geez, I'm ready for throwing. I'm ready to go here at the moment. I don't know what anyone else thinks out there, but absolutely good to go here. Comments are flying in as they always do, so keep them coming. We love getting your thoughts and your kind of different angles that you might see. Just a reminder that you can win a bamboo hurley from Torpy. They're absolutely class. You drive the ball a mile, really big sweet spot on them. So subscribe to the YouTube channel here if you're watching here on YouTube at the moment, or jump over to the YouTube channel, put a comment in, and you'll be in with a chance of winning one of those Torpy bamboos. And if you're watching this, if you're not watching this live, it's all the way up until the throw-in for the Limerick-Waterford game on Saturday that all those people be considered. Now, we'll have a look at some of the comments as we're talking. Barry Fitzpatrick, Conor Gleeson had to sit out the last day. Should Gillan be sitting out this afternoon for the same action? I mean, if me aunt had, she'd be me uncle. No one will be man-marking Baron, says Nameless King. There's no need. Ooh, interesting.
There's a reason why he could be nameless, though. He might want him to put his name to that.
Yeah. Caleb Lyons on Lynch, I'd say. I can't see Lyons being... I can see why you maybe would want him on him, but then, the height mismatch that would be left with Tom Morrissey or Grode Hegarty, I think he's going to have to be on one of those. Now, we'll jump on to Jack Nulty. Waterford could win against Limerick, but nearly everything must go right, and as Nameless King adds, and go wrong for Limerick. How will Limerick cope with Waterford's running game? We've looked at that. The media is so anti-Limerick. Are we anti-Limerick? I think because they're on top, you're always trying to come up with ways that they might lose. It's not necessarily that you're against them, but I think you don't want to see the same team winning all the time unless it's tip.
No, I think it's the same with the Dubs. Because they've been so dominant since probably 18. You're trying to find ways for teams to maybe get at them. You're just trying to make the case for other teams, and I think that's only natural. I don't think it's anti-Limerick. I absolutely love the way Limerick play, and they've brought it to another level completely. And they are a joy to watch, and they're a classic case of the sum of their parts being better, or bigger than any one player. But something I do think is interesting, Shane, and we probably can focus a bit more on it on Kilkenny and Cork, but it's definitely worth bringing up the influence of the bench for Waterford and Limerick. Yeah. So if you look at Limerick's this year off the bench, they've only had 5 points scored off the bench in their 2 games. So they're averaging 2.5 points per game. But it's like clockwork, that Conor Boylan, Pat Ryan, David Reedy, and these guys are going to come on. Obviously, Gillan the last day came in. That will probably be Mulcahy the next day. But Waterford have hit 111 in 4 games. So they're averaging 3.5 points per game, particularly with Neil Montgomery coming in, who hit 1-2 the last day. Mikey Kiley, while only being a young player, has been brilliant coming in, was good against Galway, hit 2 points the last day again. Conor Gleeson coming in as well. There's another option in off the bench, not just on the scoreboard. I do think Waterford's panel is better this year than it was last year. You throw Darragh Lyons into the mix there as well.
Shane Fives, Colin Dunford.
Shane Fives, Colin Dunford. There's a load of guys now that you think could come in and make a big difference. Limerick, the same players are coming in. They obviously have a big impact. maybe there's a potential that their impact off the bench is a small bit stale in comparison to other years, and teams know exactly what's going to come in off the bench. Adrian Breen hasn't featured. Not sure if he has a knock. David Dempsey hasn't featured much at all either. So, like, I'd probably marginally maybe give the edge to Waterford there with the influence coming in off the bench. But I do think that's interesting. Waterford have the squad. Montgomery's a big one now. Like, to me, Montgomery comes off the bench every day of the week in this particular fixture, because he started last year's All-Ireland final, was a bit overawed. And you know, when you have somebody who can come in off the bench and make a difference, all of a sudden if he starts and doesn't make an impact, then you don't have the same player to bring in off the bench. So I think there's nothing surer than Montgomery coming in off the bench, Mikey Kiley coming in off the bench, Mikey Carney, Dara Lyons. I think you have to realise it's not easy, and the prestige is with the starting 15 and marching behind the band and shaking the president's hand the day of the All-Ireland final, or giving them a fist bump as it might be now. But you have to realise that your role is so important now. Like Jim Gavin always talked about the finishers. That's what they are now. And you're as important, if not more important, than the ones that are taking the field at the start.
The bookies probably fancy Limerick here. I think one of the commenters said that they're 2-7, so they're fairly heavily fancied here. I think you and I probably both think that Limerick are going to win. But if you go through some of the things that are going to make the difference, who's got the better free taker? I think Stephen Bennett and Aaron Gallan. It's probably two cheeks of the one arse there. It's a fairly tight one. But the thing that kind of differentiates it for me really is the balance of the team. And like when you talk about 11 attackers for Waterford, and you have a little question about a couple of mismatches in terms of height and power, because Kieran Bennett's really, really good player, obviously excellent hurler and could get you 3 or 4 points in a game. But there's got to be a size match somewhere there, mismatch against him a little bit. Shane Bennett, he has played more in the forward line for Waterford. So you wonder a little bit, is that going to catch up with him? They are playing for the 4th weekend in a row. Midfield, I think Jamie Barron and Peter Hogan, they're both great foragers, but probably seem more comfortable going the other way. Dara Donovan and Will O'Donoghue, I think, probably give a nice defensive balance and solidity. And then you've Keane Lynch coming towards him looking for the ball along with those 2 wing forwards. And then you've hurling wing backs in Dermot Burns and the pace of Kyle Hayes, not to mention Declan Hannon sitting as well. And Barry Nash also, he'll be the travelling cornerback if one of them roams for Waterford, you'd imagine. I just feel that there's just that bit more balance there and a bit more of a goal threat. And you are hoping that Ozzie Gleeson, he got 5 points last year in the All-Ireland final against Limerick. One of those was a sideline, the rest from play. He's going to have a monster game. Barron's going to have to have a monster game. Whereas with Limerick, you just feel like if they all do what they normally do, they'll probably get across the line.
Yeah, just about, I'd say. But I do give Waterford a live chance. The only, the worry is about playing so many games consecutively. Like, yeah, they have loads of momentum and that's great. But you are coming up against, a really well-oiled machine here Limerick will not flag really at any stage of this game, where there is the potential for Waterford to flag, and that's only natural. But I think it's when those subs come in, and the subs that I do think can make a massive impact. If somebody is starting to croak around 45, 50 minutes, you looked at Patrick Curran the last day, he was gasping because he'd been so involved in the play. They whipped him off straight away, had another man in. It meant that they weren't, overran in that sector, even if it was for 5 minutes. So, but you would just have to side with Limerick. I think it will be tight. And I'd love to see Waterford hitting a few goals and making it interesting. Like if they're able to get 220, something like that, it's going to be seriously interesting. But yeah, in the heat of the hunt, you would have to favour Limerick.
And there's another little final thing just before we move on to the other game, is that in terms of the goalkeeper, Sean O'Brien has done very well so far, but Nicky Quaid is the experienced one. He's the one that's, he's won a couple of All-Irelands for Limerick. His puck-out strategies are so kind of well practiced at this stage. They normally do very well on them. This is a big occasion for the young De La Salle man. Now, he looks like a player who's up to it, made that brilliant save against John McGrath late on in the game. So there's no doubting that the talent is there. But even the decision to pick him ahead of Billy Nolan seemed to be a bit of a surprise to some Waterford people. He is a young guy. It's a big ask going in your first game against such a big team like Limerick. And, you know what you're going to get from Nicky Quaid. I can't think of the last time he made any sort of mistake. Maybe he's, most goalkeepers make the odd spillage here and there. Owen Murphy's unbelievable, but I can even think of one spillage he had against Waterford in the league a few years ago. But in general, he's fairly flawless. And you put Nicky Quaid in the same bracket. So, it's hard not to go for Limerick here. But I have to say the comments they're kind of going both ways. Jared Pickering Jr., the hunger really seems to be there in Waterford at present. I hope they can make it a game for 70-plus minutes. I think the Limerick bench will be their reliable self, hoping for a great game.
Jared Pickering Jr. sounds like an NFL star.
It does, yeah. The third now, and it was definitely so. So Cannock, anyone that thinks Limerick will walk over Watford having a clue what hurling is about. And Nameless King says, I'm not going to take hurling advice from Mika Hakkinen's nephew. So that's not so bad. Dennis Hayes, Limerick will surely have the edge for the final quarter. Joe Butler, will the games eventually catch up on Watford? Though the Shelmanator, Waterford got 325 from play against Tip. Keep those comments coming in. They're flying in at the moment. As I said, you can win that Torpy Hurley, the bamboo stick. I've used it, and you drive the Hurley the ball a mile. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and also put in a comment to be in with a chance of winning. And anytime up until the throw-in for the Limerick-Waterford game, 5 o'clock on Saturday, is your chance to enter. So we're going to talk later on who we think are our Hurler of the Year nominees and basically who is our Hurler of the Year up to this point. But at the moment, we're going to talk about Cork against Kilkenny. Now, let's jump back to 2 years ago. I was abroad in Croke Park to watch the two teams clash. And for the first half, it looked like Cork might actually do it. You know, we'd seen years of Cork coming up a little bit short. Yes, winning a couple of Munster titles, but not taking it on to the next level. But they were up by 2 points at half-time. And Kilkenny were at sea in defence. They had to change around their markers on a number of occasions. And they eventually just it seemed like Kilkenny just arm wrestled them into the ground and there was nothing more from Cork for the last 15 minutes. They lost eventually 2-27 to 3-28, but it felt like there was more in it than that. I mean, just Patrick Horgan was unbelievable that day. 3-18 to 2-27. Patrick Horgan was brilliant that day. Alan Cadigan got 4 points from play. But other than that, Kilkenny just completely took over the game. I'm sure you remember it too, Michael. But I was actually looking at how many changes, how much of a turnover has there been in the players in the meantime. And based on the teams that we expect to line up this weekend, there'll probably be a few injuries and a couple of late calls and all that kind of crack. But based on what we think, there's only going to be, I think, pretty much half of the 30 players there will be a turnover. By my reckoning, Kilkenny will keep 8 starters and Cork will only keep 7. So it just shows that while there may be something from that game where Kilkenny think, yeah, look, it'll be the same old Cork where eventually they'll sort of fade and we'll take over because we're the men in this sort of clash. There's been a fair change. And of that 2018 All-Ireland Under-21 team from Cork that got to the All-Ireland final, 10 of them played last week against Dublin and one more, Dr. Declan Dawson, was on the bench. So, I mean, there's big changeover in this Cork team.
Massive. It's just funny when you're talking there, like look at Waterford's age profile, look at Cork's age profile. It is getting younger and younger. It is becoming a young man's game. Lads are making an impact now. You know, there for a couple of years, you would have struggled to pick, you know, your young hurler of the year. There wouldn't have been an unbelievable amount of candidates. Some amount of candidates now. Like when you look between, let's say, Mikey Kiley on the Waterford side, would just say someone who's been coming in making an impact. Jack O'Connor, Shane Barrett, Alan Connolly, like there's so many guys. Owen Cody's going to be, you know, only under 21 this year. There's going to be an awful lot more guys of that age now, and it is becoming a young man's game. It's becoming a speed game, really. There's been a massive change. It's interesting to see it, like how many changes Kilkenny have made within that time as well, and a lot of guys.
They've only got the 8 starters that we're expecting.
So if you look at, you know, their bench now has, you know, Wally Walsh, who was starting that day, Killian Buckley, who was starting that day, Conor Fogarty, who was starting that day, Richie Hogan, they're all ready to come in and make an impact now. And I do think, I just talked about the influence of the bench as well. Kilkenny, funnily enough, have been the team who've gotten the biggest bounce off the bench this year. They've scored 114 off the bench in 2 games. Obviously, there's an extra 20 minutes thrown in there because it was extra time played against Wexford. But that's, you know, that's what 8.5 points per game off the bench is a massive, I suppose, contribution. Whereas Cork has been 1-6 in 3 games, 3 points per game, and the vast majority of that has been scored by Shane Barrett. I think he has 1-4 in those games. But it is a speed game. Cork are trying to play to their strengths and hold the ball, and they want fast, lively players on the ball, and they want to keep possession and not be playing the 50-50 balls down like they did 2 years ago. Interesting, Henry Shefflin was talking earlier on the week there, and this is really what it's going to come down to, is how much can Cork dictate? Can they be given, 80-20 ball into their forward, 70-30 ball, or is it going to be like, 25 minutes onwards of that quarter final 2 years ago where it's 50-50 ball going in? And if it's 50-50 ball going in, Kilkenny will absolutely lap that up. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think the conditions will be interesting too. It's to be showery all day in Dublin. And you'd imagine that would suit Kilkenny. Just places probably even it just makes it harder to get that ball into the hand with your first touch. Like, you've played in the backs, I've played in the backs. It is a defender's dream. It just gives you, there's more chance of the forward making a mistake, a little bit of contact and the ball can spill and all of a sudden your job is done as well. So there's a lot of questions that Cork are going to have to answer on Sunday evening. This is a massive test for them. They're probably in this position maybe a bit quicker than most people would have predicted, but it is a huge opportunity for them. They've, Kilkenny to beat to get into an All-Ireland final, which they would have taken at the start of the year. They probably wouldn't have wanted to be meeting the Limerick maybe at this stage, but they will feel that if they can get over Kilkenny and meet with, say, Limerick in an All-Ireland final, that everything is geared perfect towards an All-Ireland coming far quicker than anyone had predicted.
Okay, well, look, let's get the tactics board up here and have a look at how these teams might line out. So this is based on what everyone is expecting from, the last day out, and, will the teams more or less stay the same? Now, Niall O'Leary, he is a bit of an injury concern for Cork there, cornerback. So we'll wait and see how he gets on, and maybe he'll be ready for the game, maybe he won't. I think Shane Kingston, he did get a goal the last day before half-time when Cork saw off Dublin by 226 to 24 points. They certainly pulled away towards the end after Dublin have the lead from 8 points to 4. So I think Shane Kingston, his position might be slightly under threat here, and I have a little fancy that Shane Barrett might start this game. I could be wrong, but I just think he's a guy, every day he's come in, he's hit the ground running. It's a lot to ask a lad to come into an All-Ireland semi-final. But, so often you talk to former players, and Ben O'Connor, I did an interview with him just before the quarterfinal against Dublin. You can look it up on the playlist there on the YouTube channel or on the website. And he was saying, throw them in, throw Shane Barrett in, throw in Alan Connolly. He's happy to see these guys go in there. And like there's so many of these players that it feels like they have hit the ground running. Like Jack O'Connor, this is probably his third season in there. But at this point, he's established as one of the most exciting players in the game. Conor Cahalane, now not everything has come off for him, but he's named at number 10 and he's been operating out around midfield. And I thought he's done a pretty good job. And that, obviously that'll provide some sort of a conundrum for Kilkenny in this game. Because I think Luke Meade is probably going to drop a little bit deep. Jeremy Millerick is going to do a man-marking job on somebody, as he tends to do pretty much every day now. And I just wonder, is the pace of this Cork team, like they feel a little bit different than a couple of years ago. We keep talking about how there's a little bit of a change, that Cork are a common team. Like they still have Patrick Horgan, who looked very good the last day out against Dublin, especially when they got decent ball into him, which they did at times, some of that lovely crossfield ball. But Robbie O'Flynn, he's matured on a little bit. He was very poor against Limerick, but we all know the class he has. Seamus Harnedy had to come out injured early against Limerick. And like his form the last day against Dublin, he scored 4 points from play and he roasted them at times. And his puck, his ability to win puckouts both against Limerick and last day against Dublin was massive. Dara Fitzgibbon, he's maturing all the time. Luke Meade, in terms of sitting deep and the ability to drive forward with the ball, but also forage for ball and find the right players with it. And, as I said, Conor Cahalane. And then you have the likes of Tim O'Mahony coming through like a steam train like he did the last day. He has that Kyle Hayes-like ability to get forward on the ball. You have Coleman, who will be a playmaker. And as I said, Millerick as the spoiler. They have a nice little blend of everything there as far as I can see.
No, they definitely do. I think you mentioned Dara Fitzgibbon there. I think that's the area where Cork will definitely look to go to town. Like Kilkenny don't have an obvious midfield partnership. I think we both kind of think that Mikey Carey's the likeliest to come in at wing back to replace Conor Brown, who I believe has a serious enough hamstring injury and would struggle to play even if they were to get to an All-Ireland final. But Carey brings pace coming in. Conor Brown's loss with regards to his pace should definitely be noted, because he would have absolutely no issue tracking one of those Cork guys, and obviously would have won if it's given UCC and would know them very, very well too. But you look at Dara Fitzgibbon at midfield, it was Richie Reid the last day, and I think Richie Lahey as well. Richie Reid has obviously played centre back for Ballyhale, but wouldn't necessarily be a noted defender. Richie Lahey would be a midfielder that would be more going forward, whereas someone's going to have to pick up Darragh Fitzgibbon, and someone's going to have to stop him getting up ahead of steam and, running with a load of ball. He didn't score much the last day, but he had a massive influence on the scoreboard.
Yeah, sorry to jump in there now, mid-flow, but you're talking about who will match up with Darragh Fitzgibbon and his running ability. And I'm also thinking Michael Carey comes into the team, and one thing that stood out for him the last few games when he did come in is just brilliant pace. Like he certainly was. It was very notable how fast he was when he came in. I wonder, like I had initially thought that James Maher would mark Robbie O'Flynn here. I'll bring it up on the screen again. So I would have thought that James Maher would be trying to tag Robbie O'Flynn in this game, as he has done in the last few games against Lee Chin and Danny Sutcliffe, and done well on both occasions, eventually winning the battle with
very
Sutcliffe,
well, yeah.
Albeit Dublin, they were down so many players that I think Sutcliffe had an impossible task at that time. So I don't blame Sutcliffe for that. But maybe it'll be a case that because Richie Leahy doesn't stand out as a man marker type guy, and I remember a couple of years ago in the All-Ireland final against Tipperary, he had a very rough day, I think, on Noel McGrath that day. So maybe in terms of picking someone up, they might throw James Maher out to midfield, and maybe Michael Carey's pace might match up with Robbie O'Flynn. Now, Pádraig Walsh, I'm sure Kilkenny aren't going to leave themselves quite as open as this kind of suggests here. That's not going to be the way it pans out. But Pádraig Walsh, then, will he be picking up Harnedy? Harnedy fancies himself in the air, and rightly so. But Pádraig Walsh isn't bad there either. How do you see Cork trying to get a little bit of change here? And even from the Kilkenny point of view, Paddy Deegan, I'm sure he's not going to like having one-on-one ball into Jack O'Connor's hand and Jack O'Connor turning on him because his pace is ridiculous. Will Hugh Lawler match up with Patrick Horgan and maybe Tommy Walsh and Shane Kingston, or maybe Shane Barrett, whoever that ends up being?
Yeah, I would have thought maybe Hugh Lawler on Patrick Horgan, and Hugh Lawler to me is only getting better as well, and will be trying to. It's obviously you don't mind the square maybe as much as he used to in hurling now, but I'd imagine he will be definitely one of the two lads inside, and I'd imagine he'd pick up Horgan in there. Hugh Lawler's a bit of a freak in the sense that like he's 6'4" or 5, but it still has the mobility to be able to pick up an inside forward and could, potentially pick up any of those inside forwards there. And you wouldn't imagine he'd be done for pace either. But we've talked all year about Kilkenny having almost like a load of guys that can only play wing back. But when you're matching up here, there's not a huge amount of wing back candidates here. If you're saying that Mikey Carey goes to the other side, you're still looking at does Killian Buckley potentially come in wing back, who's been only used off the bench recently and been used to finish games. So yeah, it's going to be interesting because you can't just really lob somebody in there. There's going to have to be some. It's probably going to be. It could be potentially a matchup that they're going to go after. Maybe someone else will pick up Harnedy. Someone that maybe they think Harnedy won't destroy them for pace maybe as much as a Robbie O'Flynn, and they'll try and not get away with someone, but they'll try and put someone maybe tagging him that'll be able to match him in the air as well. But it does look a small bit ropey for Kilkenny around that midfield and half-back area. It definitely does. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do there. And I do say again, Conor Brown's absence is definitely taking away a lot from them.
Yeah, so plenty of comments flying in again, and as I said, keep them coming. Joe Butler, some of the age stats were on an article during the week. Cork 24.5, Kilkenny 25.1, and obviously one of the players that's bringing that up is TJ Reid, arguably the most important player on the field, 33, turning 34. Patrick Hickey, seems Cork have a bit about them this year. Croke Park, open space, speed will suit them. Dennis Hayes, who marks Jack O'Connor. Maybe it's Tommy Walsh. I would imagine he has more pace than Paddy Deegan. Maybe Paddy Deegan would match up a little bit better on Shane Kingston if he's the one to start. These are serious conundrums for the likes of Brian Cody.
A lot of it, Shane, is denying the good ball coming in. It's the work of Mullen, Massey Keown, John Donnelly, and these guys. Tim O'Mahony cannot be allowed to, have his eyes up delivering ball in, or have his eyes up to be taking on a tackle and breaking the line. And I think that's the big thing, that you've a fair idea with Kilkenny. That their forwards are going to work, from the inside forward line out, they're going to work ferociously hard and make it as difficult as possible for Cork and make it as easy as possible for their defenders.
More comments flying in. Hibernian, this is the year for Kilkenny, in my opinion. It's all or nothing for Cody, so he has to deliver. However, it will be a big blow for Cork hurling overall, as it's also a footnote game for them. I think Brian Cody's going to be there no matter what. Eugene Lanigan, I'd say Killian Buckley will come in for Conor Brown. He'll go with experience. The only thing is, it's pretty clear by the way he's picked the team this year that he's not necessarily favouring Buckley at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and he's going with a lot of the elder statesmen to finish games, not to start them. Like Buckley has come in, Fogarty has come in, Walter Walsh has come in. You've mixed that experience with Alan Murphy, James Bergen, Michael Carey. So they've kind of balanced the two of them off, and they need that. They can't go with all the, they can't just throw in guys that have been going well off the bench to start, and then all of a sudden they're pulling a lot of experience for their bench and a lot of impact from their bench as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. The thing is, we don't know what's been going on over the past couple of weeks. By all accounts, Richie Hogan is probably coming back into the equation a small bit from what we're hearing as well. Be interesting, like his influence off the bench could be crucial as well in the last quarter. But there would be, from a Kilkenny point of view, there would be some worries about their half back line and about their midfield, which hasn't really been, that steady or certain all season.
So what about the man himself? The man, probably arguably one of the best hurlers of the last 15 years, TJ Reid. He's going to be playing probably in at number 14, and a couple of the commenters have asked who's going to be in there on him. Is it going to be Robert Downey? Niall O'Leary, as we know, he is a bit of an injury concern. So I actually think Sean O'Donoghue is going to go on Owen Cody. Sean O'Donoghue, the job he did on Aaron Gillane the first day out. And that Gillane is an aerial threat and he's a low threat, and Owen Cody is kind of in that mold. Obviously a very different player, but you know what I mean? He can kind of attack you in a few different ways. Will Billy Ryan start or not? You wouldn't be 100% sure. So we're it's a bit of guesswork at this stage when the teams haven't been named. Then centre back Mark Coleman is obviously going to play there and sort of sweep, and maybe Millerick will come in and do a job on somebody else because Cahalane will be picking someone up in the middle area. You kind of just have to see how that pans out. But Coleman notably did a very good job of spoiling Chris Crummy in the air last time. He just got up and spoiled his man the whole time, and it was very, very impressive to see because there's such a size difference. Part of me was thinking Wally Walsh could be thrown in here to sort of upset Coleman, run at him if he can get onto the ball, win a couple of those puck outs. But Coleman has shown that he's able for the bigger man. But like Wally Walsh, if you're tired and Wally Walsh comes on you and there's a few high puck outs going down, he is certainly going to bother you. But before you take up that point on Mark Coleman and how Kilkenny will try to get at him, who marks TJ Reid? Do you think it's going to be Robert Downey? And God, if it is, I think it's going to be a seriously tall order. Ronan Hayes could have had his fill of scores early on, didn't happen, and Downey took over that matchup. That's a seriously tall order. We're assuming that Damien Cahalane and Owen Cadigan aren't going to be right for this game. Yeah,
no, it would be a tall order for a guy who's pretty inexperienced enough and has mixed his time between probably wing back and sometimes a full back as well. I don't expect, obviously it's natural to say, I don't expect TJ to stay in the one spot anything but, and I do expect him out around Mark Coleman or even drifting off Coleman to try and exploit that space like Donald Burke did the last day. Mark Coleman was good and spoiled Crummy at times, but when Burke was out around there, he definitely got a bit of joy as well. So I think TJ going in and around the inside line has been a bit one-dimensional at times, and particularly when Paddy Smith was marking him in the Leinster final. Kilkenny were putting ball in. Well, they weren't getting much joy off that. So I know TJ's legs maybe mightn't be what they were, but I would expect him to be out the pitch a good bit more, doing a lot of foraging, getting a lot of ball and playmaking. And rather than him being the one at the end of the ball, I expect him to be the one delivering a lot of the ball into Owen Cody. And that I think he'll mix his time. I think, and it's funny, if he does come out the pitch, I wouldn't be that surprised if Ger Mellerick was the one that was picking him up. But that, because he has the potential to put him on the back foot if he does get ball, and has done very good with his man marking jobs. But if Kilkenny lord a lot of ball down on top of him on the half back line, that's where they will see potential joy as well. So I think that's going to be interesting. The Walter Walsh one you said, there's a chance of him coming in from the start, particularly if you're taking him away from the impact off the bench and replacing that with Richie Hogan now, who maybe wasn't as much of an option the last day. At least you still have that massive impact and that massive experience off the bench. So if there was to be a bolter to come in the attack, you'd imagine it probably would be Wally. And him running at any of those lads would be, there'd definitely be red lights flashing for Cork.
Colm Spillane is on the bench, and so is Sean O'Leary Hayes. If Niall O'Leary isn't fit, Colm Spillane has, when fit and when in form in terms of playing games, and he's right, he's somebody you'd probably trust to come in and do that job. But that would be a fair ask to say, you've barely played there in a long time, but come in and mark TJ Reid for us.
I think he's played 2 minutes of championship. I think he came on the 72nd minute the other day. I don't think he played league. He might have started the first league game, but I don't think he did. I don't think he's played, and I think that was his first bit of action this year. And he played sporadically last year. And remember that brilliant Seamus Callan hook from another planet last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final? That was on Colm Spillane, a guy who hadn't played that much and didn't look that sharp. When he's sharp, he's deadly. When he hasn't got that game time, not so much, no more than anybody else. So I don't see that. I think there's just so many questions in this game. There really is, and the matchup's going to be really interesting. As you said, I would expect Tommy Walsh to be the one to pick up Jack O'Connor. I think Paddy Deegan offers a lot in defence, obviously, but he offers a lot going forward too. So just to put him in a man-marking job, I don't think that would necessarily be playing to his strengths. So I would expect Tommy Walsh to be the one that picks up Jack O'Connor. Jack O'Connor will do damage regardless. It's just trying to keep that to a minimum.
And do you see Tim O'Mahony doing a bit of damage in this game? Like, look at all the flyers that Cork have. If on the front foot, Tim O'Mahony, whether it's running with the ball and maybe taking a score or hitting those lovely crossfield balls that he did the last day, he could do damage. Darragh Fitzgibbon, if he gets 5 or 6 runs at his man and goes on those 80-yard runs, he's going to wear his man down and he's going to get 3 or 4 points. If Robbie O'Flynn gets enough ball, he could do anything. Same with Seamus Harnedy, Jack O'Connor you've mentioned. Patrick Horgan scored 310 when these teams played a couple of years ago. And arguably, they're a better team now. I mean, the proof is yet to be put into the pudding, but you would suggest that. Now, are Kilkenny a better team than 2 years ago? Obviously, got to the All-Ireland final, beating Limerick in the next game, and no one else has beaten Limerick any time lately. But will those players that I've named who can do a load of damage for Cork, will they end up getting snuffed out of the game? Will Kilkenny choke them around the middle area? Will they sit the half back line back? And will they just choke Cork out again? Because if you were going hurler for hurler, I'm taking Cork. But that's if the game is played on Cork's terms. And I don't know if it will be.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. There's been a different focus with Cork this year. The shooting from out the pitch that we saw in other years, like, that's not their focus now. It's to try and get the ball into higher percentage areas and create goal chances. But I think there'll be a crazy amount of bodies back for Kilkenny. I think all 6 backs, where possible, will be filling those slots. I don't think there'll be a lot of space for Cork guys to run into. I think, particularly if ball is going into their forwards, it will be pressurised ball. It will be 50-50 ball, or even potentially 60-40 ball, which Kilkenny, will come out with a lot of that. A lot of it, as I said, it comes back to how much work the Kilkenny forward line is going to be able to do, how pressurised they're going to be able to put the Cork backs under. And I think this is a different challenge entirely for Cork. And I in the heel of the hunt, I would be favouring Kilkenny. And the word you use there is choking them out. I do think they'll choke them out to some extent. And I don't think they'll allow Cork to play the game on their terms. That's why I'd be marginally favouring Kilkenny. And particularly as well, you have Adrian Mullen coming into form. I think the likes of Mullen, Mossy Keown and John Donnelly as well. They're, the half forward lines are so important now, but the performances of those 3 guys in particular, and maybe if Wally, there's a fair chance, the more I think of it, there's a fair chance that Wally will start, just because of his physical force and his ability to take on his man, but also his ability to track someone like a Tim O'Mahony. But I just cannot see Tim O'Mahony being afforded, the opportunity to run 60 or 70 yards. I think he'll be left on his arse, or he'll be held up, one or the other. I just don't see that happening. That's not what Kilkenny do. They don't allow you to dictate the terms like that, and I don't think they'll allow Cork to dictate the terms either.
Let's do this a sort of a run through the teams and sort of some of the key things, and like speed our way through this and try and come to a conclusion here. Who has the better goalkeeper, Patrick Collins or Owen Murphy? I think we're both going to go with Owen Murphy's experience here, even though Patrick Collins has looked very, very good. And even sort of as someone to distribute or come take the ball off his full back line, he looks good. But I think you'd have to go with the experience here and say Owen Murphy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I would, yeah, just about.
Okay, full back lines then. So if you're looking at Cork and there's an injury concern over Niall O'Leary, Robert Downey, Sean Donoghue up against TJ Reid and co and Owen Cody. Then at the other side of the field, you've got Tommy Walsh, Hugh Lawler, Paddy Deegan, and they might be coming up against Jack O'Connor, Shane Kingston and Patrick Horgan. I think Kilkenny are more likely to get goals there.
I would agree with you. Yeah, I am. See, the thing is, if Cork get two, if they both get 2 goals apiece, I think it's advantage Kilkenny.
Do you?
I do. Yeah. If they get 2 goals, the Cork will get goals. They 100% they will. I'd be amazed if they walk away without any goals. But like if Kilkenny can get 2 on the board as well, something like a 223 to 220 or something like that to Kilkenny, I would be favouring. But if Cork are able to get in for 3 or 4, then you're obviously talking about a different game altogether. But I do think that Kilkenny probably do have a greater goal threat. And I think Owen Cody is huge in the sense that he's offsetting almost, the pressure on TJ Reid at the moment, and has really stepped up to the mark in their 2 games. I think he only hit a point the last day, but won a heap of frees and was doing a load of that dirty work that allows other lads to flourish.
Okay, half back line then. You've got Tim O'Mahony, Mark Coleman and Ger Millerick. On the other side, you've got most likely James Maher, Pádraig Walsh, and we're looking at it going to be Michael Carey.
It's funny, if it said at the start, you wouldn't have predicted either of those 2 half back lines at the start of the year anyway. Definitely not on the Kilkenny side, and maybe Michael Carey won't start and things will be rejigged another way. But you'd probably be given the edge to Cork in that regard, I would say, just because they're going into their 4th game, and that has essentially been their half back trio the whole way through this championship.
And who they're coming up against, though, so we're not entirely sure how the half-forward line for Kilkenny will line out, but based on the team that we've kind of thrown up here, we're suspecting that it's going to be John Donnelly, Martin Keown and Adrian Mullen against the other side. Now, Conor Cahalane will go out to midfield, but Cahalane, Harnedy and Robbie O'Flynn, of all of those players, seems to me that Robbie O'Flynn is probably, and Harnedy are just in such great form, and it's kind of difficult to judge Kilkenny based on their last game because Dublin were so weakened. But I think the potential threat with enough, if they both had the same amount of ball, I would have expected that Cork half forward line to get a little bit more joy.
I'd agree with you just about, yeah.
What about midfield then? Darragh Fitzgibbon and Luke Meade up against Richie Reid, and who are we saying would be the other one? I think we were saying Richie Lahey.
Yeah, see, this is funny. Like when you look at it on paper, you're giving Cork the edge, and I would give Cork the edge in that midfield. But
this is the point in building.
Yeah.
Despite all that, we'll probably both say, yeah, I think we can depend on Kilkenny a little bit more.
It's the great intangibles, isn't it? What are your guarantees? I know, like last year's All-Ireland semi-final aside, you know what you're going to get nearly from Kilkenny most days. And then I'll just bring in, their record in semi-finals and Cody's record in semi-finals as well. So this is the 20th time they've got to an All-Ireland semi-final in his reign, which is just like mind-blowing, really. And of the previous 19, they've won 16 of them. One of them was a replay, and they obviously lost to Waterford last year. They've never lost. I don't think Kilkenny in their history have ever lost 2 All-Ireland semi-finals in a row either. And I do think that defeat to Waterford last year has been something that has been referenced. You were at that league game earlier on this year. Was it in Parnell Park when it was definitely referenced? I think at the third quarter.
Yeah, Owen Murphy let her roar. We talked about the third quarter because they had a bad third quarter in that particular game. Yeah.
And that will be a stick that Brian Cody would have beaten them with, and it will be a stick that they would have beaten themselves with all year to prove a point. They faded out of 2 games last year. They got away with it against Dublin. They didn't get away with it against Waterford and were blown away in that second half. I do think Cody has changed the pieces and moved around the pieces, and particularly tried to make sure that he's not flat, that they're not flagging with 15 or 20 minutes to go, and that they have experience and legs to bring in. So it's just the great intangible. It's going to be so hard to win ball, and particularly if conditions are as Met Aaron predict, and it's going to be damp and drizzly, and it's going to be harder to get your hands on the ball. I just think Kilkenny will ground them down. I do expect Cork to get joy, and they could get joy early, and it could be a matter of, like Kilkenny did in 2019, like literally just drag everyone back into their back line. And particularly if it's going to be hard to score from distance on a wet day, I wouldn't rule out Kilkenny having 9 to 10 players sitting back in their own back line at different stages when Cork have the ball. I definitely wouldn't rule that out. And I just think they'll choke them out and frustrate Cork, and I just marginally give them the edge. But again, as I said, the whole way through, there is that fear that Cork could cut loose. There is that fear. You said earlier on the year, who could Cork not beat? On their day, there's nobody they couldn't beat.
Yeah, and this is the question. Can they? We always talked about the consistency. Yes, they can beat anybody, but can they win like the likes of 4 games back to back? And one or two of their players did cramp towards the end of the last game. Conor Cahalane had to go into the full forward line because he was cramping up a little bit. Maybe that could catch up with them. But if Kilkenny do sit everybody back, Cork have to be forewarned on that. They've fallen foul of it a few times. They need to just kind of widen the pitch out as much as they can, hit the ball to Robbie O'Flynn on the sideline and say, hop up on your bike there and go off to the races against whoever you're against. And, make the pitch as wide as possible, because you know yourself, if you're playing a sweeper or if you're a couple of spare men back for a team, the worst thing is that the opposition looks up, they recycle the ball to each other and they find someone in space, because there's always space on a hurling field somewhere if you're cute enough not to just hit it 50-50. This Cork team has the players to not go 50-50. I don't think Luke Meade I think he's an intelligent player on the ball. I think Dara Fitzgibbon, he's nicely matured at this stage, and he can, crucially, I can name a lot of Cork players here that can go at their man, beat their man, draw somebody, 2-on-1, a 1-2. And some of the greatest scores that they've gotten this year is they do a little puck out routine, they play the ball short to the middle, then somebody comes on the overlap like Tim O'Mahony. Against Waterford in the league, he stayed going on the overlap, and I think he set up Robbie O'Flynn for a goal in that game. This is the wing back steaming through on the 21, a la Kyle Hayes. He did it the last day to set up a goal chance for, I think it was blocked by Alan Nolan, but it was a goal chance for, again, it was Robbie O'Flynn. So those two will maybe link up at different points in this game. So they just have to be smart to not end up reverting to type and blasting that ball along, because they have a very, very good chance of winning this game. Then just a couple of other things. Is Fergal Horgan the referee for this one, or is it?
Fergal Horgan's refereeing is, I would say has changed his tack a small bit and has been brilliant in the couple of games he's refereed this year. He's really kind of let things go within reason.
He'll allow killings here, won't he?
I think he will, yeah. He'll also disregard, the advantage rule that's been brought in this year, and he'll allow teams at 5 or 6 seconds that they need to get a shot away or whatever.
He'll swallow the whistle.
I think so, yeah. And I think we all want him to. We want John Keenan to do the same for Limerick and Waterford, to an extent, obviously.
Yeah, and then there will obviously be some frees. Patrick Horgan and TJ Reid, they're probably both going to knock over 9 out of 10 in terms of ones that they should knock over. There's probably no massive advantage there. But is there on the bench? You talked about Kilkenny's bench impact, 1-14 in 2 games, including the extra time against Wexford. But they that Cork bench is pretty impressive. I mean, we've talked about the options in the backline if they want. Alan Cadigan didn't even get in the last day. Declan Dalton didn't even get in the last day. They're really liking Shane Barrett and Alan Connolly, 2 lads who are made for Croke Park. But Kilkenny aren't shy of options either. A few commenters have suggested maybe Wally Walsh would start in this game, but whether he does or doesn't, look at the guys that came in the last day. Michael Carey came in and made an impact. Alan Murphy got a couple of scores and won a penalty. Killian Buckley has the experience, and then Wally Walsh. And Richie Hogan, like you've mentioned. And Richie Hogan did a bit of damage a couple of years ago when these teams played in that quarterfinals. So, there's so much to weigh up here. I'll just go to the comments before we kind of make a final prediction. Danny Mack 1. If both semis are let go by the referees, big advantage for Limerick and Kilkenny.
Yeah, I'd go along with that in fairness, because they do play more. You would have to say that Limerick and Kilkenny play more on the line than Waterford. Waterford don't play nearly as much on the line as Limerick do, and Cork don't either.
I'll tell you what though, Liam Cahill might say go out there and leave marks on him in this game. And actually, the whole point about Galway or Cork over the years is due to have the metal. They'll probably be looking to impose themselves. Imagine the throw-in. Jeez, I keep thinking about the throw-in to these games and the reward he goes. Jack Nolte, Pádraig Walsh, good half-back, but Cork half-back probably edge as their consistent starters. That is true. They do start most of those games. John O'Brien, Limerick will slaughter Waterford and whoever else they face in the final. Michael O'Callaghan, as a Cork man, don't want to see Walter start, as he is everything that the Cork half-back line would fear with his physical and aerial ability. Chris Quinn, I agree with Verney. Cork need to have an amazing start to have a chance of staying with Kilkenny. Cody versus O'Grady, round 3. Yeah, I ran into Donal O'Grady before the Dublin match last week. It's great to see him still involved. A question here for you, Verney from Isaac Dolan. Who would you rather have in their prime, Callan, Horgan or Reid or Canning? No point asking the tip man this question. Yeah, there's no point asking me if I'd have the 39 goal Seamus Callan and way more than the others, but go on.
I would take a prime TJ Reid. I'd take a prime TJ Reid.
You're so predictable.
He isn't that. I take prime TJ Reid because he's so predictable.
A fair point. Question here from our Popo says, Dublin were useless and nearly beat Cork. Chickens will be coming home through Sunday. Very harsh on Dublin. David Comfort couldn't see Cork winning. They usually have a bad 10 or 15 minutes in the game. But a point we've been touching on is pretty much everybody has had that. Waterford the last day nearly came a cropper against Tipperary. Limerick obviously first half against Tipperary also. Waterford against Galway, you know, they nearly threw away a 16-point lead. Everybody's at it, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they are. We probably Kilkenny maybe not as much, but they've only played 2 games, and they said one of those was against the week in Dublin. So probably can't judge them to the same extent of the other 3 teams on that. But just I'd love to be a fly in the wall, particularly what Cody's saying about, you know, that Waterford collapse last year. I wonder how many times it's been mentioned, maybe without being mentioned, if you know what I mean. Just that, you know, and yeah, as I said, I don't think it's all on the line for him or anything like that. They're back in an All-Ireland semi-final again. They have silverware. He's won 2 Leinsters in a row. But to get back to an All-Ireland final would be big for them. And I think from a Limerick point of view, I think Limerick would love nothing more than to meet Kilkenny in a final and try to avenge that 2019 defeat. Because if they hadn't been beaten by Kilkenny in 2019, there's a potential that they could be going for 4 in a row now.
Yeah, Chris Quinn, passer shot selection needs to be 100% for Cork, all right. And I think when we see Cork making poor decisions in that area, it's when Kilkenny will turn the screw. That's a very fair point. That often
totally
happens.
agree with that. Kilkenny will. Do you know in a game when you kind of make a lad make a decision, he doesn't really want to shoot from the area, but the space inside is swallowed up. There's quite a bit of pressure on him. He can't see a man to pass to. He's forced to shoot. I'm talking from about 70, 75 yards. He's caught between 2 minds of what he wants to do. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 of them shots go wide. Kilkenny will make Cork make those decisions, those really difficult decisions. And it's whether Cork take the shot or whether a guy recycles it or passes it laterally or something like that will probably, you know, define who wins this game.
Another comment in from Niall Fogarty. Lads, he said a few weeks ago that Cork might take a scalp, but they won't go all the way. Has your opinion changed? I definitely think they can win this game, but it is the nagging doubt about their mettle on the big stage. A kind of a thing of you're never fully sure about Cork, or you never fully consider them a contender until they actually prove it and actually do it, which is a little bit harsh and counterintuitive. But yeah, do you feel the same?
Yeah, and like while they've beaten a Clare side who are, you know, very good, they're not. To be honest, they're not serious All-Ireland contenders. They've beaten a Dublin side who are not probably serious All-Ireland contenders. This is the chance to take a scalp. I just think this might come a small bit too soon. I think Cork are proper All-Ireland contenders this year. That's not to say, or next year I should say. I don't think they'll win the All-Ireland this year, but I think they'll, over the next couple of years, they'll be, you know, the top 2 or 3 every year. I just think this might come a small bit soon for the likes of Barrett, for the likes of Connolly, even potentially for the likes of Jack O'Connor. And
maybe too late then for Patrick Horgan.
Potentially, even though you'd be surprised if he's not managed that well over the next couple of years to give himself a really good chance of winning All-Ireland over the next couple of years, just with the ability he has, you know.
So my M. Long was watching 2015 All-Ireland and Richie Hogan was having back problems even then. That's true. I mean, he's obviously a brilliant player when he's flying it. Dennis Guiney, if Watford beat Limerick on Saturday, Shane will probably have balloons and party poppers everywhere on Monday. Alan T, the head says Limerick and Kilkenny, heart says Watford and Cork. Isaac Dolan, Cork's cornerbacks are quick, but Airloud have doubts and Walter Walsh could give them big problems. Patrick Coleman, really want Limerick versus Kilkenny final. What are the chances of a Cork v Waterford final? He says quite low.
Can I just say that as well? Like, imagine we don't know how the games are going to go 100%. But if you had predicted, last November that after Waterford absolutely annihilated Cork, that they could potentially meet in the 2021 All-Ireland final, that you would have imagined the chances would have been pretty slim.
It just shows how quickly things turn around.
Yeah,
Really
and that's
well.
for Cork in particular. Look how quick Cork have been able to turn things around before. They weren't expected to win the 99 All-Ireland. All of a sudden they did, and then a couple of years later, that side was dominating for a couple of years. Things can turn so quickly, and they'll be hoping that they can continue turning.
Okay, so we're both going to go with Kilkenny anyway. I think just the legacy issues mean we can't quite go for Cork in this particular game. But, Hughie Kennedy, please keep writing Cork off. We love being the underdog, so you do. So prove us wrong this weekend. Let's talk about who's our hurler of the year at the moment. And please get your comments in on this. And who are even the candidates here? I think, strangely, the first person coming to mind is Jack O'Connor, just because he's so excited to watch. Now, I don't think really he probably is quite in that conversation just yet. I think he has been excellent. And I'm looking around, I'm thinking Jamie Barron has hit the ground running. He missed the first game out, but he's been flying it. Don't know if he is quite a contender at the moment. Some other lads that have stood out. Who stood out for you?
Probably just because the Munster final is relatively recent. You'll probably have Cian Lynch high up enough.
Yeah.
Just because he was brilliant that day. It was quiet-ish against Cork. The thing is as well, you know, if Limerick go on and win the All-Ireland, they'll have another 2 games under their belt, another 2 games where he's a chance to be seriously influential. Limerick have only played 2, whereas Waterford have played 4. Barron has only played 2 and a bit, but has been outstanding at different stages of that 2 and a bit. He was electrifying against Galway, and in the first 20 or 25 minutes against Tip, he was the same. Not sure if he's in the Hurler of the Year conversation yet. Lynch would definitely be one for me at the moment. Is there anybody? Don't think there's anybody really from Dublin that would come into the conversation. I think Alan Nolan would definitely come into the conversation for an all-star. I don't think there's anybody else of the counties that are gone. Tony Kelly would he come into the Hurler of the Year conversation? Maybe at this moment in time he would, but he's not going to be in the Hurler of the Year conversation when we talk in, at the end of this month. Probably Cian Lynch. Cian Lynch at the moment, I would say, is probably someone who I'm thinking has the potential to be Hurler of the Year again, just from where he's at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you on that one. Just looking at a few of the comments that have come in, Patrick Hickey says Sean Finn, yeah, he has been excellent. Dennis Hayes says Kyle Hayes. Do you know what? I think the thing with Kyle Hayes is...
Dennis and Kyle are clearly related, sure.
Oh, they must be, yeah. But Kyle Hayes actually was very, very quiet against Tipperary for all bar the goal. Now, the goal was unbelievable. It was spectacular. And so was the goal the first day. Well, it wasn't as spectacular, but it was brilliant against Cork the first day. But I think you would be putting him up there by virtue of that goal alone. And I don't think that would be right. Isaac Dolan, could you give it to Aaron Gallan? Well, I don't think so. Chris Quinn, Kyle Hayes, no question. Sean Finn mentioned by Fresh.
I'd have Dermot Burns ahead of Sean. I'd have Dermot Burns ahead of Sean Finn and Kyle Hayes for his consistency throughout the 2 games. If I'm honest.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on Cian Lynch. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. A couple of more comments in. Patrick Coleman, if Tony Kelly had got that goal against Cork, hands down TK, but right now Lynch.
Can I just say, Shane, I wasn't on the week after the Cork-Clare game, and I saw some people almost giving out about Tony Kelly. There's literally nowhere else he could have put that shot. And Patrick Collins just made a really good save. Good strike on the ball. There was very any other places he could have put the ball, and it was genius to even get in that position. So, I thought Kelly turned that game around completely, and dragged Clare back into it. He was obviously brilliant the first day against Waterford. Got a great goal against Tip as well. Maybe was quiet-ish against Tip that day, but I would probably at the moment have Kelly in the conversation anyway.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think who else. Okay, well, look, I'm going to look at a couple more comments here, and one of them is from Pelstar Street Football.
Austin Gleeson, Shane, would be coming Austin Gleeson will be coming into the conversation as well, by the way.
But Pelstar says here, Verney is the image of Diego Montoya from The Princess Bride. Let's check this one out, because
I've never heard of that.
You've never heard of it?
No.
Do you know this guy? He goes, my name is Diego Montoya. You killed my father. Now prepare to die. He's from The Princess Bride. So
jeez, that's a good one. I don't know if that's a compliment or what it is, to be honest with you.
It's hard to get.
D'Altagnan now to Diego Montoya.
Yeah. Isaac Dolan, if Kyle Hayes didn't score that goal, he isn't in the conversation.
Agreed.
He was doing a job against Tip. Watch it again. Tim O'Mahony, 2 more games to go. You never know if he does something like that again. Seamus Harnedy, this is a very fair point. Seamus Harnedy has been playing very well. So if we look at the games that they've played, was he good against Clare? He was pretty good against Clare. He was excellent against Limerick until he had to go off, and he was brilliant the last day against Dublin. So he's up there. Is TJ out of the question, says Isaac Dolan?
I don't think he's been outstanding. He can get himself into the conversation. He was very good against Wexford, quietish the last day. Like I would say, Paddy Smith had his measure when he was inside the last day, but he could easily horse himself into the conversation. Austin Gleeson would be the one, Shane, that would, from a Waterford point of view. I saw a few people saying that Stephen Bennett was in the same form as he was last year. I wouldn't agree with that. I think he has the potential.
He's on the cusp of it, though.
Yeah,
I feel it could come.
Yeah, he could be. But I'd say of the Waterford lads, Ozzy's been brilliant this year. Like if we're taking in league and championship as well, he's got some real good league performances when Waterford weren't going particularly well. And like I think the penny is kind of dropped at him as well. I think sometimes it takes a guy till 25 or 26 to get that consistency. Every day they go out, and he kind of is looking like he has found that at the moment, and his game has been taken to a new level. If you look at him, like he was very good the first day against Clare. He was brilliant against Laois when a lot of other guys weren't playing well. He was brilliant against Galway, and he was brilliant again the last day. So I think consistency he is an advantage. Obviously, we're talking about this conversation at the moment. He's 4 games under his belt, whereas Limerick and Kilkenny only have 2. But I think he's the standout.
I think Jamie Barron could end up being Hurler of the Year. I mean, he should have been Hurler of the Year in 2017. I think most people would agree with that. But he could end up being that yet if Waterford win the All-Ireland. And that's a lot of how it would be decided. Peter Casey hasn't got to mention crazy, says Dahi Fox. Yeah, he has been really, really good. I don't think there's any question.
I think he's 8 points from playing 2 games. He's 5 the last day. He was brilliant.
Yeah, Jason Lahey says Tim O'Mahony. Ross Wynn adds, Tony Kelly would probably had Clare made a semi-final, but Keane Lynch for me. Lisa S. Videos, come on, the Deise. Kilkenny played 2. If TJ plays well, he'll be in the conversation. The Shelminator, TJ Reid, the assassin. Jack Nulty, Owen Cody, Hugh Lawler, probably not far away. Gleeson reverse hand pass before the end of the first half. Was phenomenal. Yeah, he's some yoke.
Shane, I'm going to make a comment here. I think Kilkenny will snuff out Cork at the weekend, and I think a lot of the Cork players that have been flying up until now will be snuffed out. And with due respect to Tim O'Mahony, and I think he's unbelievable potential, I don't think he will get an all-star. I think he'll be brought out of that conversation at the weekend. I don't think he'll be allowed to dictate the play like he has in recent games. That's just somebody there saying that he's Hurler of the Year at the moment. I think Kilkenny will go after a couple of players, and I think he will be one of them in particular that they will go after.
What is it about you and sewing it into Cork? I mean, last year you dismissed them from winning the All-Ireland. This year, are they in the conversation this year or not?
Oh, by Jesus, they're in the conversation. Of course they are. But I just think there's a couple of guys that have been the pillars of their team this year that Kilkenny will go after, and I think they'll get a lot of joy out of them.
Okay, so just we'll go through a couple more comments before we finish off this little chat. Kieran Bennett, CD, I presume candidate, if he and Waterford keep going, from Jerry Mellerick. I wonder is he any relation to Jerry Mellerick? And then also Popo Mad think we thought the game was dying earlier in the year.
We didn't think it was dying. It was all absolute rubbish talk from people just trying to change the game too much when it doesn't need to be changed.
Yeah, and as Joe LK20 says, it depends on who wins the All-Ireland. Kilkenny win TJ, Limerick Lynch, Waterford Prunty, Cork Fitzgibbon. I mean, Fitzgibbon, he's made for Croke Park. Like, he's a road racer. He's made for it. A couple more comments in there. Are there any in Kilkenny in contention? Maybe Owen Cody.
Hugh Lawler wouldn't be a mile away from the conversation if he has a big game and is able to deny Patrick Horgan or whoever he picks up at the weekend.
Kevin Hegarty, Tim will relish that challenge, likely to bring out the best in him versus snuffing him out. Look, there's so many brilliant angles going into this weekend of All-Ireland semi-finals. It could be the best hurling weekend of the year. You just don't know. There's just full focus on these two fairly evenly matched semi-finals. Limerick definitely are going to be the team most fancy to win their semi-final, but it's 5 o'clock Croke Park on Saturday evening. Cannot wait for that. Cork and Kilkenny, I mean, hook it to my veins. I really want to speak to that. I think it's going to be brilliant. My hurler of the year at the moment, Keane Lynch. Has to be Keane Lynch. But it could all change. Are you going to go with Keane Lynch as well?
Yeah, I'd probably go Keane Lynch, Austin Gleeson, but I'd probably side with Lynch at the moment.
Yeah, with an honourable mention, I think, for Tony Kelly and
Cottle Malone should have been in the conversation as well. I think he's an all-star at the moment, and I just hope he doesn't get edged out. He was so consistent throughout Clare's games.
Yeah, only for we have to go and do a few other things. I have a few jobs out the back there. We'd stay here and we'd pick our early all-stars. But we might get around to that next week when we do the hurling show on Monday morning. Just a reminder that the show is brought to you by the Bamboo Hurley from Torpy. If you do want to be in with a chance of winning one and you'll drive the ball a mile, there's a lovely big sweet spot on it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel here on OurGame and also put a comment in under. We'll be picking a winner of the competition before throw-in against in the match between Limerick and Waterford on Saturday. That's about the height of it. There are a few more comments flying in. Great show, thanks. Bennett's going to be scary. If Cork win, Verney haircut.
Not a hope.
What about Barry Nash's chances for an all-star? Has nailed the jersey. He sure has. Great show, says Popo. Fair play to you, Michael Verney. Really do put your head on the block, not like the wristy hurler. That's unbelievably unfair. I constantly calling things out. Great show, says Chris Quinn, and the same from John O'Brien. Verney bang on. Kilkenny will snuff out Cork just like 2019. Cork will have new players, but the same old style, which has fallen short the last decade. So I think that's it. That's about the height of it, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, we'll tune in Monday morning when all our predictions will probably be ripped up. But it's such an interesting weekend. Haven't probably looked forward to 2 games like this in a long, long time. We've had great stuff so far. Isaac Dolan, who's a better hurler of the both of you? I'd say we'll have to test it out someday. But as I said, it's all grand doing like free taking or skills competitions. Let's throw it in an ignorant match between the two of us and see who comes out on top.
High ball for every one of them, I hope.
Whichever. Put it in anyway.
Anyway, early and often. All right, look, that's it. Hurling show is done for this week. Enjoy the semi-finals brought to you by Bamboo. Keep entering that competition and following the channel. Thanks very much, Michael. We'll chat again soon.
Cheers, Shane.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.